Hey zoo fans, I'm ZSH Plays, and this is the final habitat in the Wetlands, Florida. We are in the lake that we dug out way back in episode 1, and we're going to be building the alligator walkthrough. So as you can see, it is a huge area here. This habitat is going to take people from the Caiman River that we built a couple of weeks ago, all the way around to the Platypus habitat that we did last time. And yeah, it's going to be pretty big. So the first thing that I want to do is make sure that no little kiddies are going to be diving into the alligator lake. So we're going to be putting mesh all the way around this path. I'm using this path. I think I tried to use it in the Caiman River and then decided not to. But this has got my favorite railing on it. It's one of the few railings, in my opinion, that actually looks like something you might see in a zoo. But it doesn't have anything in between the bits of wood that are holding up the rail itself, so we need to put some mesh in to get that a bit more suitable. And then we're going to put the fences all the way around with a few null barriers underneath the path so that it works as a single habitat. And now we're going to put some land in quite near the path to give an area for the alligators to bask on and put their food on and hide some bedding in rocks and things like that, so that the guests get a good view of them. And then we're going to have a bridge going across it. I'll get rid of this land in a minute so that the keepers can get there. This is using the African hut base, which is one of my favourite pieces in the game for this kind of thing. I always use this when I'm making any sort of log bridges rather than using the log pieces. And then I'm just going to use one of the standard fences for a bit of protection for the keepers as they're walking down here. It's been a lot of fun building something like this. I built an alligator swamp in Tecton Zoo, which is actually sort of a similar design, but trying to combine that with modernism in a pretty small space. Whereas here we get to go crazy and just build a massive habitat. No concrete anywhere, it's all going to be wood. I really want this to look like a classic American gator habitat where the guests would walk around it. Health and safety, not something to worry about. It seems in American zoos or Asian zoos as much as we do in the UK, which makes it a lot more fun to build in this style. I'm going to hide some rocks for them to sleep on, one of the mud baths as well. As always, we're going to disguise this, and this is going to be really up front and centre, as you can see from the path there. So I spent a lot of time on this, making this look really nice. This is sort of the one of the centerpieces of the habitat. The other one we'll get to later, which is my favorite part of the build. I had a lot of fun building that, but we'll get to that in a bit. Just gonna finish this off, make this look as good as possible, using all sorts of different plants to hide the edges of this and just make it look more natural. I just checked and it's been 3 months, almost to the day, since I started building the Wetlands, Florida. A couple of days after Frontier announced the Wetlands pack, and I've had a lot of fun in this zoo, trying to come up with different styles of building for each habitat. And in this one we are very much in Gatorland, classic American gator habitat territory, so we can't rely on any architecture or buildings or anything like that. It's all just going to be wood and plants and water and land, basically, trying to make that look good. So paying a lot of attention to the planting in the habitat, and we'll do a whole load of terrain painting later as well. I really like the effect of having long grass underwater. That's something I do a lot, doing a lot of that here. It just makes it look really dynamic and green, and sort of simulates the sort of underwater plants and grasses that you would get in a place like this. And I'm dropping in some of the sort of groups of vegetation that I've used all over the zoo here. I built one of these sort of smaller shrubby with the odd palm bits, and then one of the big bald cypress trees everywhere, and I've dropped those all over the park to give it a continuity and make it feel nice and lush. And all the enrichment items are going to go here as well to give the alligators a reason to sit on that island so that the guests can see them. Now, onto my favourite part of the habitat. So one of the classic sort of alligator viewing experiences is the way of feeding them, where they have to sort of rise up out of the water in order to get some meat, which I've never seen IRL. Obviously I've seen it on TV, YouTube, etc. We don't have anything like that in Planet Zoo, so I decided to build one. Obviously it won't actually function, but it does look cool, and it sort of provides a centerpiece for the habitat. So I'm creating an area here where it's going to go, and then we're going to build a custom sort of feeding station with a bit of meat on it for the alligators to jump up and get it. Now I end up changing the layout. This is my first attempt at it, and this is where I built the actual sort of feeding station itself. So this layout changes a bit later, but what I was trying to do originally was combine an animal talk point so that there would be an educator stood here to look like they were feeding them, and a rotation line feeder so that we get the rope dangling down for the food. Now because it's on the path, there's no way that the keepers can get to it, so I had to make my own meat as well, which was a challenge because I am not like Drac, Haribo, Just Goron, etc., the creators that make amazing stuff out of tiny little pieces. That's not really one of my strengths, but I was determined to get one of these in, so I thought I'd show you the whole process. So maybe if you're also not someone who's amazing at working with small pieces, you can take some sort of inspiration from watching me struggle and then ending up with something that I think actually looks pretty good. So putting it together here, and then at some point I realized that I didn't actually want the animal talk point to be there. It would look better if I moved the animal talk point and then simply forced a keeper to stand in this spot using a barrier, and then we wouldn't actually need to have the animal talk point in the same sort of structure as everything else. So at the moment I'm just covering it up using some of these East Asian pieces to make a big column. It's going to go all the way down to the terrain below the water, make it look nice and strong. And then I love this new trowel piece, so I thought this would be good for sort of getting the meat onto the enrichment item itself. So I've stuck that to the side with one of the new, I think it's a hanger piece. And then using the new spade handles to create a handle for the mechanism that would lift this up and down. They're all recolorable, the items in the new conservation pack, and they are so good for building small things like this. So just getting that to match up so it looks like one mechanism, and then drop this guy in, and by putting a barrier on the floor he's got nowhere to go, so he just stays where you put him, which makes it look like he's there permanently. And then I'm going to use a few of these art shapes, I think they're Australian signs actually, to make a bit of meat that is suspended from the edge, and then we can imagine the alligators jumping up to get it. You'll see them swimming past it, at least in the cinematics at the end. Next up I'm going to put these in, so these are there to stop alligators from getting up onto the path, or the guests from dangling their hands down or whatever, just making sure there's a definite separation between alligator and guest, which is always useful. This is just a couple of the, I think they're the Europe Pack pieces. In fact, no, it's from the Europe Pack and then the same bracket that I just used. Put in this amazing custom tree that Romana Palacios made for us in the Flamingo Trail as a sort of centerpiece for the island. It's so good, I wanted to use it again. It's made of loads of the Sudanese frankincense tree stuck together with a load of moss and other things. I absolutely love that, it's so cool. Putting some more rocks in for them to bask on. I'm just tidying up some of the rock work that I've placed around the edges of the habitat. We'll put a load more trees in and things like that around the side as well. I want it so wherever you stand in this habitat, wherever you are looking, doesn't matter what direction, it's just going to look really, really lush from every possible angle. Going to put some supports in for the bridge, so it's not just sort of floating on the water. This is another great piece. This is base game, I think it's the African scaffold, I think it's called, which is really good to use as a support for wooden bridges and things like that. On the rare occasions that I build anything out of wood, this is one of my favourite pieces. It's so well made. I love the little ropes on it, keeping the separate bits of wood together. I'm going to hide the bark rubbing enrichment in this tree. I've not seen them use it yet, I hope it works. I've done that before with the red pandas in Tecton Zoo, and I've seen them use it, so hopefully that will work. And then I'm just going to use these rocks to create a few more sort of islands around the lake to keep the alligators more where the guests can see them. It's 1 male and 5 females is the maximum that you can have for them to be happy. Now obviously we're in sandbox mode, so I can just ignore that, but what I did was put more mesh fences underneath the path, using the mesh pieces to in effect create 2 habitats. So there's a male and 5 females in the direction that we're looking now, and then another male and a female behind there. Gonna put a nice sign in to sort of start the habitat off and announce it. We'll do the same at the other end, put some gates in here for the staff paths, and that is the alligator walkthrough done. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for watching this series. I'm so happy that people have enjoyed this one. It was a big decision to start a new zoo alongside Tekton, and I'm really happy that everyone's enjoying it. I will see you next week for a full tour of the wetlands. Stick around for the cinematics, and I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.